Chapter 6. The second Josie turned around, Ryder bolted around the corner and into the first row of bushes near the entrance to the park. Stripping down, he flung his clothes behind him and dropped to all fours, balling all the energy into a knot in the pit of his stomach. He pushed outward. Skin gave way to fur that blanketed his body in a shiny dark coat. His muscles elongated, pulsing with strength and the promise of speed. Fangs dropped from his mouth. With one last solid shake, the shift was complete. As lightning struck nearby, quickly followed by the roll of thunder, he howled. Let his cry match the vibration in the air. And then he stopped, rejuvenated. It had been too long since he'd shifted. For the last 6 months he'd denied himself the urge. If he wanted to catch Mr. Boone, though, the drought ended tonight. Giving his legs a good long stretch, he elongated his neck and shook. Damn. Felt good. He stomped through the grass, feeling the wet blades slide between the pads of his paws. The moon radiated shifting energy through him, rocketed through his veins, and gave him more strength than he could dream of. He sniffed, easily detecting Mr. Boone's scent. It was pungent and spicy, tickling his nose. He sneezed and then scrubbed his nose through the dirt. How'd a man who smelled so bad manage to land so many mistresses? After checking to make sure the coast was clear, he bounded out of the bush and into the next one. This shrub was longer and flanked the sidewalk where Mr. Boone had just walked. Ducking beneath branches slick with rain, he weaved his way along the path, keeping an eye on the cheater. It was so much easier to follow him in this form. Josie didn't help the situation either. Her scent consumed him, distracting him from Mr. Boone's. And although he loved to hear the crazy things that came out of her mouth, every conversation was a sidetrack from his assignment. Dragged back to the task at hand, Ryder watched as Mr. Boone turned sharply, veering toward the outer corner of the park. If he left and walked back into the city, Ryder would have to track back to get his clothes. Couldn't exactly shift back and strut into the city in his birthday suit. He glanced behind him. The clothes weren't that far away, but it'd mean he would have to take his eyes off the subject for a few minutes. With the rain washing away his scent, Ryder might not be able to pick it up again. Mr. Boone exited the park, his pace slowing as he crossed the street. Where the devil was he going? As the cheater window shopped in a bargain store on the corner, Ryder decided that he'd watch him as far as he could, then double back and wait for him to pass through the park again. He had to come back for his car sooner or later. 1 block down, Mr. Boone stopped in front of Charlie Ann's Jewelers. Using his hand to swipe over the glass, he peered inside. And then he waved. Bingo! The shopkeeper, an 80-something male from the smell of his denture glue, pushed open the door and welcomed Mr. Boone inside. The cheating Mr. Boone was buying jewelry for his wife or one of his many mistresses. Making a mental note of Charlie Ann's and the time, Ryder turned back and headed for his clothes. He'd make a visit to the store tomorrow, do a little inquiry, and ask Mrs. Boone to let him know if and when she received any expensive tokens of appreciation. Seriously doubted it, though. He hated to ask her, but there was no way around it. As he circled back for his clothes, he pawed over the top of his pants, completely soaked. He hadn't really expected them to be dry, but from the feel of his pocket, even his phone and wallet had gotten drenched. Focusing on the energy swirling inside him once again, Ryder shifted back to human form. Watched skin cover his arms and legs, and his proportions returned to normal. Dressing quickly, he hopped into his pants and shoved his feet into his shoes. Thrusting his arms into his shirt as he ran, Ryder took off toward his car. Only it wasn't there. Josie hadn't waited. Damn it. Even though he told her not to, some small part of him hoped she would. A few blocks over, he caught a cab and slipped inside. Without thinking, he barked the address to his apartment, and the driver took off. Sliding back against the seat, his gaze skipped over the clock on the dash. 9:30. No, wait. Hold up. Braking in the middle of the street, the driver glared through the rearview mirror and waited for Ryder to give the next order. Is that really the time? The driver nodded, cocking an eyebrow. If he went home now, he could shower and change into dry clothes. But by the time he got back to the winery, the paint night would probably be over. Regret stung his side. Not because he'd skip out on painting his masterpiece, but because he'd missed Josie taking off her shirt. As his thoughts raced, he went numb head to toe. It wasn't from the cold, but From the mental image of Josie stripping out of her tank top. No, it was more than that. He wanted to be in the room when she laughed, to watch everyone warm around her, to be there when she smiled, to watch the whole room light up. He craved being near her, having his nerves soothed away from one soft inhale of her natural fragrance. Bluxome Street Winery, he ordered. No way I'm missing this. Chapter 8. You're going to tell me everything, Carrie gritted between clenched teeth. Who made the first move, when it started, how it started, everything. Sighing, Josie followed her sister to the bathroom, away from prying eyes. After she dismounted, God, had she really said that aloud? She dressed in a rush and waited for Ryder to pull up his pants. Since his shirt was soiled, he couldn't exactly wear it the rest of the night. The winery had a strict no shirt, no service policy. Thankfully, Mitch had taken Ryder aside to put on something dry and clean. There's not much to tell, Josie said, checking her reflection in the mirror. Her lips were pale from kissing, her cheeks flushed. It was amazing what kind of effect Ryder had on her. From the moment he'd walked into the winery tonight, she'd felt strangely connected to him. Attraction had always been there, but this was something different and much more intense. It was primal, as if he called to her on a base, sexual level that had the hairs of the back of her neck standing on end. She could feel his eyes on her when she wasn't looking, could almost feel his gentle caress on her skin, even before he touched her. Their connection was far more than physical, though. She'd be foolish to think it ended there. When she wasn't around him, all she could think about was returning to his side, standing face to face, gazing up into those gorgeous blue eyes. It took all of her willpower not to leap into his arms. As strange as the thought was, sometimes it felt as if she belonged to him, if they belonged together. Now that he'd made her come undone, she needed him more than her next breath of air. I don't know who made the first move, Josie said finally, but it only started today. This morning in his office. 10 minutes, everyone. The hostess's voice echoed through the winery and into the bathroom. You should be just about finished with your paintings. Did you get to complete yours? Josie stared at her sister through the mirror. You could go back and we could talk later. Oh no, nah. We're not dropping this now. And what were you doing painting him? He had splatters everywhere. Not everywhere. A warm blush crept into Josie's cheeks. It was an accident. I had some on my hands. Totally gross. I don't want to hear any more. What happens in the closet stays in the closet. Shuddering, Carrie paled the way she always did when she was stressed to the max. What were you doing in Ryder's office this morning? How could she explain what she was looking for without putting a bunch of doubts in her head? If she questioned Mitch for no reason, why worry Carrie when she already had to deal with so much? No, she'd still have to figure out a way to pull the truth from Ryder, or get him to shut the hell up about it and let them be. I wanted to talk to him about a few wedding details, Josie lied. Bachelor and bachelorette party stuff for tomorrow night. I thought the guys and girls could meet up at some point. She really had thought about making plans but hadn't gotten around to fleshing out the details with Ryder. And then you kissed? Carrie said, going palms down on the marble sink. I don't know what you're thinking, but you're not using your head. Ryder's the last thing you need in your life right now. Josie's defenses shot up. I wouldn't say that. I would. Carrie splashed water on her face. Mitch says he's a serial dater. Won't stay with a woman longer than a few dates. He says Ryder's a playboy. Takes what he wants and leaves. But oh, what would it feel like to have those hands gripping her hips, taking what he wanted? She heated through merely thinking about it. You should see the look on your face right now. Carrie glanced up, catching Josie's gaze in the mirror. It's like someone just offered you bliss on a stick. Do you even hear me? I hear you loud and clear. Josie's heartbeat sped. But what if Ryder's been going from woman to woman because he's been looking for the right one? You think that's you? She shrugged. Why not me? I don't know, Josie, because when you first got here you said he ditched you in Golden Gate Park earlier tonight. Or maybe it's the way he hid you in the closet to make out with you. That stung. Why don't you chill out, Carrie? I know you're worried about me, but you're being way too harsh. Yes, he left me in the park, but he made sure I was safe first. And yes, he made out with me in the closet, but only because I pushed him in there. Damn, she really liked him. How had that happened so fast? Carrie stared, speechless, her mouth dropping open. A low rumble came from the main room. The guests must have been finishing their paintings and starting to move around. Footsteps closed in on the bathroom, and the door swung open. One of the camera women charged in, stopping when her gaze flipped between Josie and her sister. She must have been able to feel the tension too. "Sorry," she said sweetly. "Am I interrupting something?" "Yes," Carrie spat, folding her arms over her chest. "We need another minute." Nodding, the camera woman backed out of the room. When Josie brought her attention back to her sister, she said, "Why are you still looking at me like that?" "Because you're not seeing him for what he is." Carrie's voice rose as she gripped Josie around the shoulders. "He's a player through and through. And I thought you hated him. Mitch said you two weren't getting along." "It's not that exactly. He's got an issue that's been hard for me to deal with." It was amazing what could change in a few short days. "If he doesn't come around, we could have a bigger problem. Otherwise, I think we might actually work." "I don't know what you're talking about." Carrie backed away, dropping her hands. "What problem?" "Nothing," Josie said, not wanting to burden her sister with any more. It was clear bridal panic was already setting in. "It's for us to worry about." "Us?" She paled. "Now there's an US? You're in deeper than I thought." "Hell yes, she was making out with the matchmaker," Mitch said, holding up his fist for Ryder to bump it. "Way to go, bro. It's nothing to congratulate me over." Ryder went to work buttoning Mitch's extra dress shirt rather than fist bump over something stupid. Getting caught in the closet might have made Josie feel cheap. And that was the last thing he wanted his luminary to feel. She should have felt beautiful and valued every single day of her life. By someone else, of course. A non-shifter who wouldn't howl at the moon every month. At the thought of her with someone else, a protective growl rose in the back of his throat. This coming from the guy who used to have a black book larger than the Bible. Mitch shoved his hands in the pocket of his slacks as a group of painters passed through the entry beside them. "Since when do you care about Josie's feelings anyway?" He lowered his voice to a whisper. "I thought you didn't like her." He liked Josie too much. And that was exactly why it needed to end before they got too involved. She deserved someone who would make her happy every day of her life. That guy wasn't him. He could fight the urge to shift for months, but he'd have to turn eventually, and then she'd see him for what he really was. "It doesn't matter what I feel for her. I'm going to get through the next few days with the wedding, and then that'll be it. She can move on. She'll find someone else to make her happy." A surge of jealousy rose in him hot and fast. He swallowed down the vial feeling as he sat on the edge of a lounge in the corner. "Speaking of the wedding, how's the postponement going?" "It's not." Mitch sat beside him on the opposite edge of the lounge. Rather than face him, his friend stared straight forward. "You should get on that," Ryder said simply, staring at the floor. "So you keep telling me." Ryder tapped his wrist. "Clock's ticking. The wedding is Sunday, you know." "That's 2 days, Mitch. We've got the bachelor party tomorrow night, the rehearsal dinner the next, and that's it. If you don't tell her tonight, you're never going to find a good time. Everything's moving so fast." Mitch bent over and scrubbed his hands over his face. "I can't believe it's only 2 days away." There were the doubts and cold feet he'd been expecting. This, right here, was the reason Mitch and Carrie shouldn't be getting married. If he was having doubts now, their relationship would only combust under marital pressure. "On some level, I know I have to tell her before the wedding." Mitch kept his voice low, barely audible. Only a werewolf would be able to pick up his words. "I have to. I can't trap her into this and expect her not to blow a gasket when I start howling at the moon." "But how do you tell someone you love that you're a werewolf? How do you broach that subject without sounding insane?" "I imagine it'd be like telling Josie she's my fated mate, but we'll never be together." For the first time, Mitch craned his neck around to look at him. "Say what? Now?" "You heard right." Ryder exhaled heavily and kept his voice as low. Guests passed by on their way out of the winery, none of them realizing a conversation about werewolves and fated mates was happening a few feet away. "Josie's my luminary. I felt the spark when we first touched. It couldn't have been anything else. And if you raise your fist for me to bump again, I'm going to slam it into your forehead." "That's awesome." Mitch chuckled. "What are you going to do about it?" "Not a damn thing." "If she's the one fate chose for you," Mitch whispered, Why wouldn't you want to be with her? Because fate doesn't know what the hell she's talking about. Fate, Ryder gritted between clenched teeth, hasn't seen hundreds of marriages fall apart the way I have. Have you heard what the divorce rate is lately? Isn't it 50%? Somewhere around there. And we're talking about non-shifters. Imagine. Werewolfs, Mitch. 1,000 years with one person. As anger flushed through his veins, he shook his head. It can't happen. It's not possible. Two people aren't designed to be in each other's space for that long. But it has happened. Mitch nodded to a couple on their way out. With other werewolves in the pack. We've only been transitioned for 3 years, so we haven't been around long enough to see it happen firsthand, but everyone says it does. Everyone, Ryder said flatly as his face fell. Everyone says werewolves live happily for 1,000 years. You're drinking that water now. I am. Mitch flipped Ryder off with his left ring finger. Where a wedding ban would be in a few short days. I'd never cheat on Carrie. Not in 1,000 years and not in 1,000,000. You honestly think you'd cheat on Josie? No, that wasn't it. He wouldn't cheat. Never had and never would. But Mitch wasn't getting it. Josie had a normal life. One where she could believe in love at first sight and marriages that lasted the normal span of a lifetime. She deserved to have that life and live it to the fullest. You know what? Ryder said, standing. I'm done talking about this. Why don't you worry about how you're going to cancel all this shit with the wedding, and I'll worry about what's going to happen, or not happen, with Josie. This isn't about the stupid divorce rate. Mitch stood with him. This is about what happened before. The first time you shifted. Knife to the gut. I said I was done talking about it. Mitch folded his arms over his chest and stood between Ryder and the exit. You didn't know what to expect during your first shift. And you sure as hell didn't expect to catch your woman cheating. You were right to be angry, Ryder. It was more than anger. His stomach caught. It was seething hatred. It's not like you took someone's face off, Mitch said with a half laugh. You didn't touch anyone. But I could have, I wanted to. The words ripped from the core of him, burning with regret as they escaped his lips. You didn't see their faces. They looked at me like I was a monster, because in that moment I really was. He paused as flashes of the horror of the night flickered through his mind. All I know is there is never going to be anything serious between me and Josie. There can't be. Zoning on something in the winery, Mitch exhaled heavily. Well, at least you won't have to worry about telling that to her face. Why? Because you already did. Mitch nudged his chin over Ryder's shoulder. She just heard the last thing you said. He spun, stomach souring, searching for Josie through the main hall. He barely caught a glimpse of her dark hair flipping over her shoulder before she rushed out the back door. Chapter 9. Josie downed her second latte from Starbucks and watched the sun come up from her office window. Last night, after overhearing Ryder tell Mitch that they'd never be together, she decided not to go home. Carrie would have wanted to come over and talk, the way she always did when something was wrong. Josie had checked her cell in the cab on the way to Sausalito. Just as she'd suspected, Carrie had blown it up with texts wondering if she was okay, if she wanted company. Yup, figured right. Crashing after a bottle of Pinot, Josie had texted back, don't come by. Won't hear the door. But of course, knowing Carrie, she would have come by anyway. The willpower to hide her head under the pillows tonight simply wasn't there. She would have caved and wound up opening the door for her sister anyway. Choosing the safe route, Josie had come to the office and buried herself in work all night. No rest for the weary or the successful. Dumping her empty cup into the trash, she returned to her desk and started skimming through applications. Time to find another match. As the clock clicked over to 8, the front door to her building dinged. Open. Who wanted to turn in dating applications first thing Saturday morning? Singles should have been out on the town late Friday and sleeping off hangovers. At 8 a.m. Josie. Ryder. Damn. I know you're in here. Why'd his voice have to be so sexy? It was deep and raspy, the most soothing sound she'd ever heard. Hello. Maybe if she was quiet he'd leave. I'm not leaving, he said, as if he'd read her mind. I'll just sit out here and wait in your lobby. You only have one way out, so you have to pass by me. Sooner or later. Double damn. She bit her nails. First order of business tomorrow. Call to install a back Door in her office. I'm back here. First door on the left, she called out, fluffing her hair into place. She probably looked horrible. Hair sticking up everywhere from tugging at it all night long, and black rings under her eyes from makeup. Runoff. Wonderful. Snatching the Dasani from the corner of her desk, she tipped it over, dribbling water on her fingers. When they were soaked, she scrubbed them beneath her eyes to erase the rings and smashed her lips together to bring back their color. Come on in. He pushed open the door slowly and took a long look around before coming inside. Wasn't sure you'd let me in. I wasn't either. And she really wasn't. You look great, he said, hands in his pockets. I like what you're doing with your hair. You're going for that sexy, just rolled out of bed look. He blew out a slow breath. It's working for you. Oh yeah. That was totally the look she was going for. Not. Thanks. She glanced in the reflection of the window. Her hair was tousled, frizzed. Seriously needed a brush. But he liked it this way. Maybe for the bachelorette party tonight she could. No, she wouldn't change a thing about herself for that. Man. What can I do for you, Ryder? She tinted her fingers over the desk, exuding a sense of professionalism she didn't truly feel. The room didn't seem to be big enough for the two of them and their combustible chemistry. Did you come to fill out an application? Jerking the drawer open, she pulled one out and handed it to him. If he didn't want something serious with her, why not fill it out and find someone else to fool around with? Here. Take it. She dropped it on the edge of the desk and hid her hand so he wouldn't see them quake. You can return it when you're finished. Sitting in the chair across from her desk, he crossed his ankle over his knee, without taking a single look at the application. Josie. What? I came to talk. Even though his blue eyes still twinkled brightly, he looked tired, his face sunken. And wasn't that Mitch's shirt that he'd worn last night? Do you have a second? I'm working. You don't have a minute to spare? I wanted to explain what you might have heard last night. Panic latched onto her windpipe. It's nothing. Really. I'd rather not brush it under the rug. She stared him down. To be honest, I'd rather forget about last night altogether. He flinched. It was the tiniest scrunch of his handsome face, but he hadn't liked what she'd said. If that's what you want. It is. And if you don't mind, I've got a lot of work to do. To prove it, she opened a manila folder sitting on the right edge of her desk and started perusing the applications, touching each one. This takes up all my energy. I was wondering how you do it. Uncrossing his legs, he slid to the edge of his chair and clasped his hands together over his knees. Can I watch? No, you can't watch. Her heartbeat faltered as he quirked an eyebrow. It's private process. And you don't believe in it anyway, remember? He leaned forward, nearly touching her desk. It's not that I don't believe that you can sense a connection. I simply think you could be wrong every now and again. It's not possible to know if someone is right for someone else based on an application alone. It seemed to work so far. She shot him a smug grin. 99 couples have come in single and ended up married. Mitch and Carrie will make 100 if you keep your nose out of their business. What about you? He asked, his voice going dark. Me. Have you ever thought about finding your match? Long ago, when she'd first opened Cole matchmaking services, she'd outlined what she wanted in a partner and husband. More than the details on paper, she'd been adamant that they had to have a connection, an undeniable spark when they first met. She refused to settle for less than love at first sight that bloomed into a quiet wedding ceremony, a large family, a blissfully passionate forever. High hopes? Probably, but why not aim high? This was her life. For one glimmering moment, she thought she'd found something special with Ryder. They had a connection like no other she'd ever experienced, except for one small detail. He apparently hadn't seen the same future she did. If she wanted a future with marriage and children, and she did, more than anything, he wasn't the one. I've searched for my match as recently as last week, she said, averting her gaze to the applications. Of course you have. Shaking his head, Ryder cleared his throat awkwardly. Why wouldn't you, with all these applications at your disposal? Shouldn't be hard to find a cat-loving vegetarian with a stable job. You're right, she answered quickly. There are hundreds of guys who fit the bill. But none of them were as appealing as the guy sitting across from her. As a strange rumbling sound filled the room, Josie leaned closer to her. Computer. Was it doing an automatic update or something? Just as suddenly as it came, the growling sound disappeared. When she met Ryder's gaze, he seemed to stiffen. That was strange. She paused, still listening. Did you hear that? Hear what? At the moment, she couldn't hear anything but her own heartbeat. It was pounding away the way it usually did when Ryder was near. I guess it was nothing. Anyway, the hard part is finding someone on the same page as I am. Someone who wants to settle down, get married, and have children. But she didn't want just anyone. She wanted him even though he didn't want her in the same way. She must have been pathetic and desperate. But if Ryder wanted her right here, right now, she would give herself freely. I don't think you'll have a problem finding someone who wants to give you those things, he said, though he sounded pained, as if the words burned passing his lips. Then why won't you? She wanted to say, but she bit her bottom lip instead. Jaw clenching, Ryder leaned back and gripped the armrests of the chair. Are you bringing a date to Mitch and Carrie's wedding? She'd been so caught up in him, she hadn't thought about it. I should. Shouldn't I? Yes. That's what you really want? She struggled to read the stoic expression on his face. He revealed nothing, so she echoed her previous statement. Just to be clear, you want me to find a date for the wedding? He went rigid, still as a statue. Why wouldn't I? You have the right to be happy just like everyone else. No mistaking that, was there? And if he didn't want to be that man, why not find someone who did? Even if she compared every man to Ryder, the one she couldn't have. Then I will. The air in the room sparked with tension. Well, until I find the right guy, I'm going to focus on the company's next perfect match. Wonder who the lucky one is today. As she perused the papers, one in particular, an application for a 40-something doctor in Daly City, buzzed in her hand. Her hair stood on end. Plucking it from the stack, she held it in one hand and skimmed quickly. Here's one right here. A single guy looking for love. Dave Ransfield's life is about to change. She probably shouldn't have said his name aloud, but whatever. She was too busy proving a point. He went to medical school at Davis, she read aloud. No kids. One previous marriage to in Ransfield, who is a first-grade teacher from Simi Valley. Ended 4 years ago. Red flag, Ryder piped up. What flag? He's quick to divorce. You don't know that. Josie frowned at him. He and his previous wife could have been married a decade or more. Does it say that? No, she said, searching. But I'll find out before I bring him in to match him with someone. Doesn't the divorce rate rise with subsequent marriages? Ryder smirked as if he'd won the argument. I thought I read that somewhere. Doesn't that worry you? Maybe he wasn't meant to be with his first wife. Her heart pounded as she stared into his sky-blue eyes. Maybe he got married too young and is now going to find his one true love. His shoulders tensed. You really believe in true love? Deep down? No. Bullshit. Of course I do. I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't. As the temperature in the room seemed to skyrocket, Josie went back to reading Mr. Ransfield's application. Everything else checks out. Not a psycho so far. You can't tell if he's a psycho from a few dry details. Like I said earlier, I'll do more research on him. Still won't tell you everything you need to know before you hook two people up. She turned to the back page to scope out Mr. Ransfield's picture. She waggled her eyebrows for effect. Tall, dark, and handsome. Predict I'll find his perfect match before nightfall. Chuckling, Ryder leaned over the desk to sneak a peek at Mr. Ransfield's picture. You think you can tell how good-looking this guy is from a selfie he took in his bathroom? That's not his bathroom, she fired, looking more closely, and then she met Ryder's gaze. He laughed. Made you look, though. How old are you? 4. Moving his application away from the stack, Josie thumbed through the rest. Desperate to find Mr. Ransfield's match. If she could find a perfect pair in front of Ryder, maybe he'd finally believe she could do this. But no other applications tickled her fingers the way his had. Turning to the manila folder on the right side of the desk, Josie removed applications from the previous month. Oh, now she's pulling out the big guns, Ryder said, tracking her movements. Ignoring him and closing her eyes, the way she sometimes did when she really wanted to feel the client's energy. Josie perused the applications in her mind. There Same buzzing sensation. Picking up the doctor's application, she held it in one hand and plucked the second one from the stack. Gotcha, she said, grinning ear to ear. Perfect match. She knew she hadn't lost her touch. Mitch and Carrie really were perfect for each other. She hadn't had a mismatch yet, and there was no reason to think she would now. The wedding was going to proceed smoothly from here on out. Really? Ryder's eyebrows nearly reached his hairline as his eyes went wide. You found it? Just like that. She waved the applications around victorious. How do you know? I feel it deep down in here. She patted her chest over her heart. There are some connections you can just sense. Like the one she shared with him. I agree with you there. His voice went hoarse. 100%. Some connections can't be denied, no matter how much we try. As he swallowed hard, she met his gaze. An odd glimmer of craving burned in his eyes, capturing her as his prisoner. He looked hungry for something, and her heart stuttered in answer. So who is she? Ryder said, rubbing his eyes to sever their connection. Mr. Ransfield's one true love. Grinning smugly, she held up the application and glanced at it for the first time. The perfect match for the doctor is. She scanned quickly. Anne Brown. I bet she's lovely. He nodded, his lips pressed together firmly. And what does Anne do? She's a first-grade teacher. Josie paused, reading the rest quietly. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. Wasn't that what you said his first wife did? Ryder asked. Nodding, she shoved the applications into the manila envelope. You know what? I don't feel comfortable sharing all of this with you anymore. Yet I took you on a stakeout with me. He fired. Come on. What else? No, she tightened up like a clam. It's over. Done. He snatched the manila folder. She jumped and tried to rip it from his hands. What are you doing? She hollered, charging around her desk. Give it back. Sliding the application from the envelope, he tossed the remaining applications on her desk and skirted the chair so she couldn't catch him. I just want to check something, he said, dodging her as she leaped for it. I have a feeling. This is private. She went toe-to-toe with him, reaching for the paper. He was too tall, damn it, holding it out of reach. Would you give it back? Please. Maybe if she asked politely he would do it. Keeping it high, he read. And Brown of Simi Valley. Give it back, she blurted, bumping into his chest to reach the paper. Heat from his body radiated through their clothes and bloomed through her. Ryder. He read on. First-grade teacher. Stop, stop, stop. No kids. Damn it, Ryder, look at me. He did as he was told, ripping the breath from her lungs. It wasn't until that moment she noticed how close she was standing. Hip to hip. Chest to chest. He moved his head an inch lower. She could lift up on tiptoe and catch his mouth. Chills scattered over her skin at the thought. He wanted to say something. Would he kiss her again? Damn it, why did she want him to? She should have been angry or hurt by what he'd said last night. Instead, she was more turned on by their playful banter than she'd been with all of her exes combined. I have 5 words for you, he whispered, dangerously close to her mouth. As he breathed, his chest moved hers. Yeah. Hadn't she been the one in control a few seconds ago? Hadn't she been composed and ready to prove a point? He held up his hand, spread his fingers and counted down. Formerly married to David Ransfield. Those were not the words she'd wanted him to say. He grinned with that effing delicious mouth. You almost hooked up a man with his ex-wife. And then he laughed. You have to admit it now. There are certain people who don't belong together. Sometimes it's not meant to be, even when there seems to be a connection there. Doubt trickled in. Had she messed up when she matched her sister with Mitch? Ryder was certainly pushing for it. If only he would open up and tell her what she was missing. Feigning indifference, Josie snatched the application out of his hand. What? If he was meant to be with his ex-wife, but he was too much of a pompous asshole to realize what was in front of him the whole time. You're right. Ryder nodded. Just once. Of course you're right. And then he let himself out. Smart move, considering he'd gotten her all fired up. When Josie closed up shop at 5 o'clock and headed home to get ready for Carrie's bachelorette party, she was determined to put the day and the horrible mismatch behind her. Tonight she'd get glammed up and watch Ryder drool over what he couldn't have. Chapter 10. The woman wouldn't even listen. They'd had the perfect opportunity to talk in her office earlier. Could've explained everything. It wasn't that he wasn't interested in her, it was the soul-maddening opposite, but marriage, true love, and a forever romance weren't in the cards for him. And that's exactly what she was looking for. It wasn't that he didn't want her, as much as he knew he shouldn't have her. If she'd swallowed her pride earlier and let him explain that, things might have been smoothed over before the bachelor party tonight. So, Mitch said as he stumbled out of their cab onto Gough Street, where are we headed next? Being that Mitch only had Ryder in the wedding party, his two cousins, both non-shifters and annoying as hell, had begged to come along tonight. Probably had something to do with the prospect of seeing the scantily clad women who usually popped up at bachelor parties. But Mitch had made his intentions perfectly clear. He didn't want to be dragged to a strip club. Too many people, he'd said. Keep it low-key. Bar hopping, a few drinks, relaxing night out. If Mitch had been honest with himself, and with Carrie, the wedding would have been in the same tune. Happy to oblige, Ryder had planned a tour of Mitch's favorite werewolf-owned bars in the city. By midnight, he and the cousins were down a few drinks each. The groom-to-be, on the other hand, had taken 4 shots at Brady's Irish Tavern and another 3 at the infamous speakeasy Whispering Whiskey. It was amazing he was still able to formulate coherent sentences. As his cousins tumbled onto the sidewalk cursing and laughing, Ryder pointed to the sign overhead. We're here. Jolly Rogers. Mitch threw his arms up as if he wanted to hug the pirate on the sign. I don't remember this place. I thought you said we were touring my favorites. You don't remember it because you've never been here before, Ryder said, swinging open the door. But the guy who owns this place is a 200-year-old werewolf. He hasn't found his luminary yet, but he dated some dame for almost a decade and suspected her of cheating. He hired me and we've been in touch since. I've never been here before, but I hear he's got 400 rare rums stocked behind the bar. And I know how much. I love rum, Mitch finished. You know me so well. He tripped over the threshold and then laughed into a burp. Once inside the pirate-themed bar, he threw his hands up and hollered, I'm getting married tomorrow. Around 4. The house. And just like that, Mitch was the favorite drunkard of the night. All eyes turned their way as a roar of cheers and congratulations filled the room. The crowd was a mix of shifters and non-shifters, a loud, lively blend. Ryder took the seat next to his friend as the cousins made the rounds. Pounding the bar to get the bartender's attention, Mitch said, I'll start with 2 Captain Morgans. As the bartender nodded and started pouring, Ryder stared his friend down. I can't believe you're getting married day after tomorrow. Well, get used to it, my friend. Mitch patted him on the back, but with the force of his drunkenness, it was more of a shove. I'm going to be the happiest married man on the planet. Ryder suppressed his sigh. Still charging full steam ahead? Why the hell wouldn't I be? His movements were jerky, his head taking longer to swing from person to person. If he made it out without hurling, it'd be a miracle. You think I'm going to let something small like my hairy other half come between us? Ryder shushed him as the bartender slid their drinks over. Although he knew what they were, could sense it from the second they walked in. The non-shifters passing by didn't know a thing. And the San Francisco wolf pack wanted to keep that way. Who knows? She might like me as a wolf. Mitch snorted into his drink. We'll be able to shift for another 2 days, you know. Maybe I'll show her my wolf form on our wedding night. Oh yeah, that'd go over well. I vow to love and cherish you, and keep my howling to a minimum so it doesn't wake the neighbors. Not happening. Tossing back his rum, Ryder checked the door. Carrie had called earlier asking to meet up on one of their stops. He'd given this place as a possible meeting point, but he hadn't heard back on whether Josie and the rest of the ladies, of course, would be coming. I admire the fact that you're willing to take such a huge leap, Ryder said, as the rum warmed his middle. Not everyone can do it. Message. As Mitch smacked his lips together to make the noise, he spit onto the bar. It's not leaping off a bridge, stupid. I'm leaping into Carrie's arms. As long as she's the one catching me, I'll gladly fall. Wow, Mitch. Didn't know you were so sentimental. Takes a lot of liquor. He winked and then pointed to his nose. You might be one of the only people who truly knows me. Reason number 636 why he and Carrie shouldn't get married. Carrie should know you better than anyone. Ryder said and then ordered. Another drink. The bedrock of your marriage shouldn't be laid with deception. Take it from someone who knows. Now who's sentimental? Mitch tossed back the second glass of rum when it slid over. I'll tell Carrie tonight. Scout's honor. As he saluted, he misjudged the distance to his head and poked himself in the eye. Don't need that eye anyway, he said. I've got another one right here. And then he poked that one too. Chuckling to himself, Ryder patted Mitch on the back. That's all right, buddy. I get the picture. You're going to tell Carrie tonight. Yeah, for sure. Tonight. Mitch raised his hand in triumph. Or tomorrow. Or the next day. Either way it'll be soon, or I'm not an Eagle Scout. You're not, you've never been, never mind. Doesn't matter. Ryder sighed. Sooner the better, Mitch. Remember that. Another few drinks, and Mitch would be swearing he was the president. Hell, another few rounds and he wouldn't even know what he was saying. Wait. If Mitch was hammered by the time Carrie showed up with Josie, he wouldn't be able to control himself. All Ryder would have to do is mention canines or the full moon, and Mitch would probably tell Carrie everything. There was still time to do what was right. Carrie deserved to know she was marrying a werewolf before she walked down the aisle and vowed to love him her whole life. If sober Mitch didn't have the balls to tell her, he'd make sure drunk Mitch let the cat, or the dog as it were, out of the bag. The hard part was keeping it private. A moment between Mitch and Carrie. The last thing he needed was Josie sticking her nose into their business and finding out about werewolves with her sister. If Carrie decided to marry Mitch, bond with him, and turn into a werewolf herself, her sister would probably find out. But that would come way later. For now, the werewolf revelations were on a need-to-know basis. Are you sure they're going to be here? Carrie dragged her feet exiting the limo. Mitch doesn't like pirate movies. It's not a movie, Carrie. It's a bar called Jolly Roger's. Taking care of drunk people was the worst. Especially when the inebriated one was her sister. Carrie thought everything was funny and danced whenever she heard the hint of a song. At the last bar, they'd passed a homeless man on the sidewalk who gave a catcall whistle as they walked by. Clueless, Carrie started shaking her hips and cozied up to the guy who smiled as if he just won the lottery. Thanks to the arm he'd draped over her shoulder, Carrie now smelled like a gagging mixture of city grime and cat pee. I know a pirate joke, Carrie said, grinning. Wanna hear it? Josie opened the door to the bar and pushed her sister inside. Sure. Carrie blinked slowly, as if trying to remember. Why'd the pirate's son keep failing his match test? I don't know. Why? No, not his match test. You're the one who matches. Carrie hiccuped so hard it threw her backward. She stumbled right into Josie's arms. I meant math test. Why'd the pirate's son fail his? Nope, not math either. Oh, his alphabet. Yup, that was it. His alphabet test. Why'd he fail? Something to do with airs, I bet. No, silly. Carrie swayed and then fell against her. Because he kept insisting there were 7 C's. Cute. If the joke hadn't been ruined from the get-go. Josie guided Carrie through the pirate-themed bar. The place was rustic and vintage and decorated tastefully with pirate everything. Judging from the impressive lineup of liquor behind the bar, they probably served every brand of rum on the market. From what she remembered about Mitch's application, Captain Morgan was his drink of choice. As long as he hadn't bent the truth about that too. Strawberry margaritas were Carrie's favorite, but she'd already had 4 of them. How about we get you some water? As Josie reached the end of the bar, she mouthed their order to the bartender, who brought them right over. Here. Carrie gulped it down, dribbling water down her white halter top. You sure passed your math test, didn't you? Excuse me. Emptying half the bottle on her first swig, Josie washed down the Midori sour she'd had at the last bar. What math test? Not math. She shook her head, irritated, as if Josie were the one who'd misspoke. Match. You passed with flying colors when you set me and Mitch up on that first date. Thanks to you, I'm going to marry the man of my dreams. Where was Liza with the camera crews now? That's right, they'd taken the night off. Figured. Liza had said they'd be at the rehearsal and dinner tomorrow night. Anxiety flickered through her as images of her special with Martha Silverstone filled her head. The woman could make anything sound appealing, as if everyone needed it this very instant. She did a special on a local art gallery, the place stocked up full and then sold out. If she spoke kindly about an up-and-coming restaurant, reservations had to be booked a year in advance. If she nailed this spot, Cole matchmaking would launch into the singles stratosphere. That is, if Ryder would chill out for another 2 days. As the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and a knowing flush bloomed over her skin, Josie searched the room. Ryder was already here. He and Mitch sat at the opposite end of the bar. Mitch seemed oblivious they'd arrived, his gaze focused far off over the liquor lineup. His mouth was blabbering a mile a minute, though she couldn't hear what he was saying over the Caribbean music blasting from the speakers. Ryder, on the other hand, stared straight at her, as if he wasn't listening to his friend. She couldn't read his mind, but the message in his steely blue eyes resonated through her core. I think I'm going to barf. Carrie clutched her shoulder, digging in her nails. Right now. No, you can't throw up here. Come on. Steadying her by the arm, Josie lifted her sister off the stool and guided her step by step to the ladies' room down the hallway. Right here, sweetie. The one with the fancy mermaid on the door. Leave me. Carrie shoved her sister into the hall and backed into the sea-colored bathroom. This isn't going to be pretty. Thanks for the warning. As the door locked shut, Josie spun right into Ryder's chest. Oh, she said, the air ripping from her lungs. Excuse me. But he didn't move. You look mind-numbingly beautiful tonight. As his gaze raked over her body, from the V-cut glittery tank top emphasizing her breasts, down to her black leather pants, he licked his lips. I came over here to say something, but now that you're standing in front of me, the words are gone. Mission make Ryder drool. Officially accomplished. I think you've said enough. She tried to push past him, but he didn't move. Can I get by? Can you give me 2 seconds? I don't see why I should. You've already said enough. Let me see if I can. Think back to the talking you've done the last few days. She tapped her finger against her chin with dramatic flair. You said there's never going to be anything serious between us after you took me in the closet. Then you said I should bring a date to Carrie and Mitch's wedding, and encouraged me to search through the applications to find my perfect match. I'm pretty sure I've heard all I want to hear from you ever. I haven't been able to get you out of my head. He backed against the wall and kicked up his foot. Not for 1 second. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you pushed me to date other people. She took 2 steps down the hall, but he touched her arm. Was the softest brush, but desire starburst through her arm, stopping her in her tracks. What do you want, Ryder? You're so hot and cold, you're making my head spin. On a pained moan, he threw his head back against the wall. What you overheard the other night doesn't matter. Her heart beat loud in her ears as she walked away. It really doesn't. I know what you want, but I'm not the man who can give it to you, he blurted, his dark, raspy voice following down the hall. We don't want the same things. That's why there can never be anything serious between us. That's what I came to your office to tell you. Hold up. She spun on her heel and turned back, standing in front of him with her hands planted on her hips. That's why you've been putting on the brakes? Because you can't give me what you think I want? I thought you didn't want to be with me. God, Josie, how could I not want you? He reached out for her, but when she didn't move, he dropped his hands. From the start, you've been transparent with what you want and need, and it's the opposite of what I can give you. Every minute I'm with you makes it harder to pull away, although it's the right thing to do. Was there anything in the world more right than this feeling fluttering inside her? There are parts of me you don't know, and I don't think you ever should, he whispered. You'd live a happier life not knowing about my world. What was he talking about? Didn't they live in the same world, the one where it felt so damn good when they were together? Ryder, if you're hesitating because you're worried about me, you should stop. The nervous energy swirling through her stomach gathered into a hard knot. Am I looking for a relationship that ends in a marriage with a family? Yes, absolutely. I won't lie and say I'm not. But I'm not looking for those things to happen tomorrow. Tension-filled silence stretched between them, and when she thought maybe he wasn't going to answer at all, he said, Come here. This time when he reached out for her, she shuffled toward him. A low hum, almost like a satisfied growl, came from his chest as his hands found the curve of her waist. As he gazed into her eyes, she could have sworn he peered into her soul. If we start something, I don't think I'll be able to stop, and I don't know how it'll turn out in the end, he said as his hands ghosted up her sides. I can't bear the thought of hurting you, and the way you look at me, damn Josie. I never want anything to change that. Is that really what you're torn up about? He nodded, his greedy hands gripping her hips. I want you so much it hurts. But I can't stay away from you no matter how hard I try. Ryder. She cupped his face in her hands as her stomach tumbled. Stop trying. He crushed his mouth to hers in answer, slipping his tongue past her lips. She was helpless to stop the heat as it rippled through her. Between the spicy taste of the rum on his tongue, the warm wet feel of his mouth, and the hungry slide of his hands as they gripped her waist and held her in place, she went dizzy. Desperate to steady herself, she flattened against the wall and grasped at his shoulders for purchase. You can take me right here or take me home to bed, she mouthed against his lips as they slid against hers. Either way, we're taking this one day at a time. And tonight I'm all yours. At the final word, he groaned and lifted her off the ground, roping her legs around his waist. He gripped her backside and held her in place. A surge of something primal passed between them, a spark of want that superseded anything she'd ever felt before. She was his, and she'd never feel this way about another. There was no way to know it, but she did. Truly, with every hard drum of her heart. He claimed her, plunged his tongue deep into her mouth, grasped her rear, pressed her against his rock-hard shaft, stole her breath and made her crazed with want. Over the sound of her thumping heartbeat came the sound of someone crying hysterically. Carrie. Slowly, Ryder set her back on the ground. Only then could she hear the breath punching out of him. He was hot, his forehead slick with sweat. The temptress in her relished the thought that she had the same effect on him. Sliding from beneath his hold, Josie put her ear to the door. On the other side, Carrie gasped and then started uncontrollably sobbing again. What's wrong? Josie panicked. Are you okay in there? No, I'm not okay. More pained cries that tugged at Josie's heartstrings. Did you know all along, Josie? You had to know. How could you not tell me? Josie frowned in Ryder's general direction, though she didn't focus on him in particular. What the hell is she talking about? Carrie hasn't talked to Mitch tonight, has she? Ryder's attention shifted to the bar and then back to her. I thought you guys just got here. We did. Josie pounded on the door, the piercing sting of fear rising in her stomach. She hasn't had time to see anyone. Maybe she talked to someone on the phone while she was in there while we were... Carrie, let me in. Ryder went pale. Mitch is gone. As he strode around a barrel and out of sight, Josie knocked incessantly. Carrie, if you let me in, we can figure this out. The door clicked and then was yanked open. Carrie's face filled the gap. Rings darkened the skin beneath her eyes. Her lips were dry, cracked. There's nothing to work out. There's nothing you can do now. Sliding through the slight opening and into the bathroom, Josie gripped her sister around the shoulders and checked her eyes. Dilated, red, tear-stained. What happened? I got a text from one of the vendors I'm supposed to meet with tomorrow. Before the rehearsal. She hiccuped, choking on her tears. She congratulated me. Josie waited for the story to continue and lightning to strike down. It didn't happen. Carrie dropped her head in her hands and shook. Sweetie, Josie said, half laughing. Whoever this vendor is, I'm sure it's her job to congratulate you. And that's a good thing. No, you don't, hiccup. Get it. You're going to have to cancel your thing. Your show on my wedding. I'm sorry, I can't marry Mitch. And just like that, the world came crumbling down. Chapter 11. This wasn't happening. Not now. Not when they were both about to have everything they'd ever wanted. Carrie wanted Mitch. Josie wanted her business to succeed. And she wanted Ryder more than anything else. So far everything had been smooth sailing. Well, not with Ryder, but the wedding was 2 days away, and the television crews were prepped and ready to roll on her special. What the hell had happened to change that? Calm down, Josie soothed, brushing her hand down Carrie's back. You need to get up off the floor and tell me what's going on. Knees drawn to her chest, Carrie hugged them tight and rocked back and forth. You knew all along, and you didn't say anything. Josie knelt in front of her and lifted her chin with 2 fingers. What did I know? My name, Carrie screeched. You knew what was going to happen when we got Married. When you marry someone, you take their last name. Confusion pricked her heart. Carrie was either drunker than she thought, or having a major meltdown. It was a good thing the cameras weren't here right now. This was not the image either of them wanted Martha Silverstone to amplify. Care Bear, I have no idea what the hell you're. I'm marrying Mitch Oakey. Carrie looked right through her. My name's going to be Carrie Oakey. What was she missing? What was the big deal with taking Mitch's last name? I'm sorry, but I don't. Say my name fast, Carrie blurted, throwing up her hands. Carrie. Oakey, Carrie Oakey, Carrie Oakey, karaoke. Her future name morphed from words to syllables and sounds. Karaoke. My name is going to be freaking karaoke. A laugh erupted out of Josie's belly. As Carrie glared, nostrils flaring, she covered her mouth with her hand. I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh. No, you shouldn't. It's not funny, especially because you knew the whole time. Carrie pointed into her face. You saw the applications first. You had to know. Why didn't you say something? I swear I had no idea. But it was pretty damn funny. Defeated, Carrie slumped against the whitewashed tile wall. What am I going to do? I can't be karaoke. Every time someone says my name, I'll die. Or break out in song. Not funny. She couldn't help it. The jokes were too easy. Shrugging, Josie cracked a smile. It might not be so bad. Seriously. Carrie's eyes went wild. Paging Carrie Oakey to the front. The doctor will see you now, Carrie Oakey. Oh my gosh, Carrie Oakey, I haven't seen you in ages. I'll hear karaoke for the rest of my life and hate every person who tries to hide their laughter. Well, she couldn't blame them. Carrie needed a hefty dose of reality before she lost the best thing that ever happened to her, and Josie's chance to be in the spotlight. Are you really going to cancel the wedding to the man of your dreams simply because of his name? She asked, wiping her sister's tears. That's something he can't even control. His name was given to him and he probably wants to pass it on to his children. No, scratch that. Your children. As his bride, you should be proud to take the Oakey name. Carrie made a shishing sound, blubbering her lips together. Would you take it and be a laughingstock for the rest of your life? No, probably not. But she didn't love Mitch the way Carrie did. Honestly, Carrie, it didn't even occur to me until you said it 5 times. Fast. Yeah, but you were always pretty gullible. Hey now. You know I don't mean it. Carrie sniffed and then swiped her hand beneath her nose. So you think I should go through with it? Absolutely. Tired, glossy eyes stared back at her. And you're not just saying that because you don't want to miss out on your special with Martha Silverstone. No. Yes, maybe? It had been the first thing that came to her mind, hadn't it? God, she must be the worst sister on the planet. No, that's not the reason. It was a major one, but not the only one. I want you to be happy. Absolute truth. And I'd hate to see you ruin something because of the way his name sounds matched with yours. That's petty, don't you think? Slowly, and after a long pause, Carrie nodded. Yeah, I guess you're right. Come on then, Josie said, helping her tone-deaf sister off the floor. Let's get you cleaned up and back out to your fiancé. Ryder couldn't find Mitch anywhere. He wasn't in the men's room or at the tables in back or out front. He'd check just in case. Frustration setting in, Ryder pushed out the back door. It was an emergency exit, but the doors didn't sound. The smell of cigarettes, sewer, and street grime hit him like a sledgehammer. Squelching the urge to spew, Ryder pinched his nose and searched through the alley. Senses tingling, he glanced one direction, down the street, and then he scanned the other way. A low growl reverberated through the air. His heart drummed as rage lurched through his veins, burning him up, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Ryder turned on his heel. A wolf lurked in the shadows behind a dumpster, its green eyes piercing the dark. Mitch. As the growl intensified, the wolf pawed at the ground. Closer. Out of the shadows. Smooth, dark fur flattened over his back and burst around his face. A familiar gleam in the wolf's eyes had Ryder blowing out a relieved breath. Thank God it's you, Ryder said, getting a rein on the fury whipping through him. You scared the shit out of me, Mitch. For a second I thought I was going to have to shift in the damn alley to protect myself from a rogue attack. From the day Hayden Dean took the position of alpha of their wolf pack, rogue attacks had been on the decline. A few years ago, a late-night walk through an alley would have been like a welcome for a lawless wolf to attack. Now though, the rogues were down in number, nearly gone. Hayden had taken the pack from reckless to civilized. Some people were born to be leaders. Others were, well, others did what they could to survive. What the hell are you doing anyway? Ryder double-checked to make sure the emergency exit was closed completely. You're lucky Josie or Carrie didn't come out here and catch you like that. I'm drunk enough that I might not care if she sees me, Mitch said through their pack's process of mind speak. What do you think? Projected thoughts could carry through the pack even if one was in human form and one was in wolf form. Ryder could block the thoughts if he chose, but he'd never cut Mitch out, especially not now when his behavior was so damn weird. You know I'm all for revealing this side of yourself, Ryder said, striding toward his friend. But this might not be the right time. You're both drunk. Exactly. I could finally get this off my chest without freaking out about it. He plopped onto his back haunches and nearly fell sideways into the dumpster. And there's a very real chance she could forget about it in the morning. That's kind of defeating the purpose. Did he not understand how important this part of him was? You want her to remember. You want her to accept you completely, and have no doubts about the ceremony or who you really are. Was he the only one seeing the situation clearly? You could scare her this way, Ryder said, appealing to his logical side. But if you sit her down and explain the dynamic of shifting and how you were turned during an attack, she might understand. She'd still be afraid, but it'd be different than running into a werewolf in a dark alley. She won't be scared. He sneezed, his muzzle touching the ground. It's me. You know that, and I know that, but she doesn't. You're more formidable than you think. Ryder patted his friend on the head. She's not prepared for this. But neither of them was prepared for the back door to swing open with a deafening creak. Ryder pushed Mitch into the shadows, hiding him with his legs, as Carrie and Josie burst into the alley. There you are, Carrie slurred, stumbling over her 2 feet. Josie held her upright, arms beneath her sister's armpits. Have you seen my fiancé? You might know him. His name is Mr. Oki. Why? And I love his name. Just so you know. You can tell him that too. She made a flying motion with her hand and then zipped her lips closed. And I'm A-okay with taking it. Mitch had been right earlier. She probably wouldn't remember a damn thing in the morning. She was toasted. That's great, Carrie. I like his name too. Nerves shot through him as Mitch pawed at his feet. Hey, you know what? I saw Mitch come out of the bathroom a few minutes ago. Why don't you go check on him? Josie frowned, her gaze shooting to the shadows near the ground. That's strange. Carrie blinked slowly. Because the smarty pants bartender said you two left out the back a few minutes ago. He was wrong. Planting a hand on Mitch's forehead, Ryder pushed him back. Still his drunk friend edged forward, pressing against his legs. He was about to seriously step over the edge. Telling Carrie the truth was one thing. Outing himself in an alley to Carrie and her sister non-shifters was breaking Wolfpack law. Tell her I have something to show her, Mitch projected from behind him. You're being a drunken fool and not thinking straight, Ryder bit out. It's not a good idea, and you know it. Excuse me. Hand over her heart, Josie stepped closer. What's not? Damn it, in his panic he'd forgotten she couldn't hear werewolf mind speak. Filled with fear and frustration, he shook his head. I wasn't talking to you. Tell her, Mitch said. Better give her a warning or something. This alley is about to get a whole lot hairier. Don't do this. Panic welled up inside him. I'm warning you. Stopping, Josie put up her hands. Warning me? About what? I'm coming out. Don't. He was wound so tight he could burst. Not like this. It's not going to end well, and you know it. She narrowed her eyes at him. You're the strangest man I've ever met, you know that. And she didn't know the half of it. In a few seconds, though, she was about to get the real picture from Mitch. Will you take Carrie back inside? Ryder rattled, anxiety shaking him to the core. Please? I'll meet you. But before he could finish, Mitch counted to 3 and darted around Ryder's legs. He rounded the dumpster, slipped as his front legs tangled together. Screams exploded through the alley as Mitch tore through it and slid to a stop in front of Carrie. Dragging her sister into her arms, Josie shrieked back against the grimy wall. And then she eyed Ryder with a mixture of alarm, sheer terror, and bewilderment. That look right there was the one he'd been desperate to avoid. He could almost read her thoughts as her attention turned from the wolf to where he stood, facing them, hands in his pockets. For facing a large black wolf in a dark alley, he was too calm. Chapter 12. Fear cemented her shoes to the ground. She couldn't move an inch. Couldn't breathe, not one breath. Oh God. Josie was too stunned to cry out. Don't make any sudden movements. Carrie. Her sister blubbered something that sounded like a curse. And then the unmistakable sound of vomit hitting asphalt echoed through the alley. Something splattered on Josie's shoes, making her gag reflex tick. Keeping her attention on the wolf, Josie slid her feet along the ground. They budged but barely. Stay back, she rasped, her throat drying to sandpaper. You don't want to hurt us. The wolf kinked its neck to the side and stared. Its pupils widened to black holes as it flopped onto its hind legs and watched her edge toward the door. From behind him, Ryder exhaled heavily, marched closer, right up to the beast. What are you doing? Her heart lurched into her throat. Ryder? Get away from that thing. You should get out of here. He circled close to the wolf, as if he wasn't afraid of it lashing out. What was wrong with him? Did the guy have a death wish? Last chance to change your mind. Why the hell would she do that? With the speed of a lightning bolt, the wolf snapped its neck around to stare Ryder dead in the eye, and then it shook its big furry head. Did the wolf just answer you? No, that couldn't be right. They both glanced her way, as if they, the wolf included, heard and understood what she'd wanted to say. Mitch, don't, Ryder pleaded. She'd never heard his voice so pained. Mitch. Carrie gripped Josie's arm and hauled herself off the ground. Where? Is he out here? The wolf yelped. Ryder smacked it in the back of the head, eliciting a low growl. You're going to get your hand bitten off, Josie said, grasping the handle. And I'm not sticking around to watch. As the wolf's head arched up toward the moon, it howled, deafeningly loud. Josie. Carrie covered her ears with both hands. What's happening? She could almost sense her sister's fear. Shielding her, Josie dragged Carrie into her arms and held her tight. This was it. The end. At least they'd die together. And where the hell was Ryder in all of this? Watching it happen. Smacking it in the back of the head to piss it off? Lot of help he was. Too bad he couldn't do something with all that bulging muscle. Holding her sister's head against her chest, Josie chanced one eye. The wolf finished its frightening howl and then shook, ears to tail. It was one of those full-body shakes dogs did after they got hosed. Only the beast wasn't wet, and it was about 3 times the size of the biggest dog she'd ever seen. Its back legs quivered and shook. Its nose scrunched. Ears flattened down. Tail shrank. In another ferocious shake, its fur flattened over its back. Ryder backed away, as if to give the thing space. It was like something out of a horror movie, and she couldn't look away. Terror gripping her, Josie squeezed her sister and watched the wolf's head shrink. Its body transformed. Fur gave way to skin, and its hind legs elongated. Don't look, Josie breathed into Carrie's hair. The wolf's hideous and dying, or something. He's not dying, Ryder said plainly, but I'll kill him for this. She felt her face scrunch as she glowered at Ryder. In the split second she took her eyes off the wolf, it disappeared. Mitch had somehow replaced the wolf and was crouched on the ground right where it had been. His skin was sweaty, clammy. His hair was matted down to his head, and he was buck-ass naked. Carrie, he panted, covering his male parts. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, and I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I didn't know how else to explain it. Explain what exactly? Slowly, Carrie peeked from beneath Josie's arm. Mitch. He nodded, though the rest of him remained unmoving, as if he was waiting for some kind of assurance that everything would be okay. Wait, what's going on? Josie glared at Ryder. He was much too calm, the only one who looked relaxed with the situation, actually. What happened to the wolf? Striding to the dumpster, Ryder kicked Mitch's clothes at him. He appeared unfazed, completely cool and relaxed, as if he hadn't witnessed the same thing. They had. Say something. Panic shot through her, followed by a gripping wave of nausea. Ryder, where's the wolf? Mitch stood, covering his groin with the pile of clothes. I'm right here. I'm scared. Carrie shook as if she were going to rattle apart. What's happening? I'm a werewolf, Carrie. Josie's ears rang. Come again. Ah shit. Ryder paced a tight circle, scrubbing his hands through his hair. Here we go. Josie narrowed her eyes at him as he folded his arms over his chest and sighed. Why was he always on the inner circle of everything? Harboring secrets, telling lies, standing there looking too sexy for his own good. Closing her eyes as Mitch rose off the ground, Josie released her sister. I'm sorry, Carrie said, a giggle bubbling out of her. I didn't hear you. Could have sworn you said you were a werewolf, Mitch finished. The wolf that stood here a few seconds ago, it was me. Funny, but he said that as if he actually believed it. Carrie swiped her hair out of her eyes. What do you mean the wolf was you? None of this was making sense. The wolf had been right there. Right there. 1 second it was huge with a raised back and pointy fangs, and the next minute Mitch was in its place. Josie did a quick scan of the alley. Nothing there but dumpsters and littered garbage. As she looked up into the yellow face of the moon, a clamming wave of panic settled over her. Werewolf. Full moon. Could he really? No, that couldn't be right. She wasn't thinking straight. This wasn't true blood. This was real life, and things like that didn't exist. Her gaze shot to Ryder. She tried to read him but came up blank. He'd been too at ease through all of this, hadn't he? He'd slapped Mitch in the back of the head, stood idly by while the wolf tramped toward them. He'd been unafraid. And neither of them were laughing, which is what they should have been doing if she and Carrie were getting punked. Everyone was too much at peace and acting too serious for this to be a joke. I'm so sorry, Carrie. Mitch reached out for her. Please don't be mad or scared. This wasn't what I wanted. I couldn't plan this. It just happened. Jump back. Smack away his hand. But she reached out, squeezing his fingers. Carrie, don't. Fright wormed its way through Josie's middle. He just said he was a wolf. Didn't you hear him? He's either delusional or telling the truth and really is a wolf. Either way, you should run as far away from him as you can. Carrie jerked back her hand. He won't hurt her, Ryder said flatly, searching through the alley. It's not like that. He's not the type. Fear flipped to anger. How do you know what he's capable of? He's psychotic. No, he's being honest. Ryder paused and then, I told you there were things you couldn't know about a person from a dating application, didn't I? You should have listened from the start and told your sister to move on. This was what you were hiding? The fact that he's a compulsive liar? How was I supposed to know that? It wasn't like that was question number 33 on the questionnaire. Her voice screeched as she held her sister's shaking hand. You could have told me from the start that your buddy was crazy. You put my sister in danger because you were too stubborn to admit the truth. Did you not see him in wolf form? Standing right in front of you? He shifted. Right here. Ryder kicked the side of the dumpster. The sound reverberated off the alley walls like thunder. You saw him with your own eyes. I don't know how you're able to stand here and deny it. Carrie, please, Mitch pleaded, lifting his arms from his sides and coming closer. I'm the same person I was before I was attacked by a werewolf and bitten. Now every full moon on nights like tonight I can feel the shifting energy of it pulsing through my veins. I can turn into a wolf and back again. Without much effort. Unless I'm piss drunk, apparently. He was speaking as if he really believed that line of bull. You were bitten by a wolf? Carrie asked. A werewolf. A rogue shifter playing a cruel joke. 3 years ago, 2 bites. On my pulse points here and here. He pointed to his neck and his wrist. Turned me into what I am. I thought it'd make me a monster like the one who attacked me, but I swear I'm the same man I was before. Carrie's mouth dropped open. You might as well be claiming to be Bigfoot. How do you expect me to believe you? If you see the shift with your own eyes, it might help. Mitch took a deep breath and then exhaled heavily. The last time you weren't expecting it, so you didn't know what you were watching. This time you're ready and I'm going to show you everything. Ryder folded his arms over his chest. Point of no return. Ever heard of it? Mitch, you're about to blow right through it. I know, Mitch said after a hard clench of his jaw, but it's the only chance I have at getting her to understand, and the only way she'll believe me. Then we can go on with the wedding and put this behind us. No more lies. Ryder nodded matter-of-factly and put up his hands in surrender. No more lies. At his words, Mitch's chest muscles twitched. His entire body went rigid, flexed and on edge. And then everything happened so quickly Josie could barely take a single breath in the flash of time. Mitch's legs shortened as he dropped to all fours. Fur blanketed his body, covering the tan skin that had been there moments before. His nose elongated to a furry muzzle. His eyes remained wide and soft, but they moved back on his head, his very wolf-like head, and blinked at Carrie expectantly. Carrie and Josie took a giant step back, flattening against the bars outside wall. God, Mitch really was a wolf, full-fledged, howling at the moon, covered with fur head to paw. She wouldn't have believed it if she hadn't seen the change happen with her own eyes. Holy fuckity, Carrie started, her hands trembling as she held them in front of her. I can't even say it, but you're a wolf, Josie breathed to herself, staring at Mitch. Fear shot through her, cementing her feet in place. That's not possible. As if he'd sensed her fear, Ryder was at her side a moment later, his arm wrapped around her waist. You don't have to be afraid, he said softly. You're safe. Still, shock rattled through her at the sight of the wolf Mitch as it stalked closer. As she leaned against Ryder for support, he tucked her arm around him, hugged her tight, a silent guard at her side. His presence made her feel protected, as if everything was going to be all right even though they were staring at a freaking wolf, her sister's future husband. Was she dreaming? What was that thing that she was supposed to do to discern nightmare from reality? A pinch. That's right. If it hurt, all of this would be her new reality. Glancing down at where her arms twisted around Ryder's, she reached down and gave him the hardest pinch she could. She gouged, dug in her nails, yanked his arm hair. Mother F. Flinching, he jerked back. What was that for? She released him as giggles bubbled out of her. Laughing was the last thing she expected to do right now, but between her frayed nerves and Ryder's face, as it snarled into a grimace, she couldn't help it. She fought back full-on belting laughter. Pinches are supposed to tell dream from reality. Damn it, woman, you're supposed to pinch yourself. This isn't a dream. Rubbing his arm, he chuckled tightly. And you're laughing. If I ever get into kink, I know you'll be the one to get a rise out of inflicting pain, my little sadist. The thought of being Ryder's little anything made her stomach tumble. And then her thoughts whirled back to Mitch and the bizarre reality that faced them. Ryder's reaction to his friend still didn't make sense. You knew he could do this, she said, sliding back into his arms. It wasn't a question. He nodded anyway, stirring up the anxiety in her once more. I can't breathe, Carrie said, grasping at her throat. Her eyes went wide as they searched Josie's face for reassurance. I think I'm hyperventilating. My chest is tight and she pointed to Mitch. I can't believe I'm going to marry a werewolf. Day after tomorrow, I'll be married to a dog. You don't have to marry him, Carrie, Josie said as her heart gave an empty pang. No one would blame you if you wanted to cancel now. Why don't you leave that up to her? Mitch said, dragging her attention back around. He stood in front of them, as naked and sweaty as he'd been before. What the hell, you're back? It was all she could think to say, as if somewhere in the last few seconds he'd gone on a faraway vacation and suddenly returned. But he'd been here all along. It doesn't take long to shift, Ryder said, his head resting against hers. Just a few seconds. A shiver raced up her spine as she pulled back and gazed up into his eyes. They darkened in the last few seconds, and it wasn't because of the shadows cloaking the alley. There was something else he wasn't saying. Exactly how much did he know about this whole thing? Mitch. Carrie's voice cracked. When did the attack happen? How long have you been like this? Does it matter? Josie's blood went ice cold, even though her body radiated with the heat flowing from Ryder's body. I can't believe you're going to stand out here and listen to. Shua. Carrie put up her hand and didn't even glance her way. I want to hear what he has to say. Cue horrific shock. I knew it'd be okay. A grin curled the corner of Mitch's lips. I knew she'd love me anyway. Shudders scattered up Josie's arms, and Ryder wrapped her up tighter, enveloped her completely, brushed his hands up and down her arms to soothe away her worry. It worked. She eased into his touch. Her breathing slowed. Her muscles loosened. I'm not saying I can get over this. Hands keeping him at bay, Carrie backed away a few steps. But I want to hear whatever it is you have to say. I don't want to turn my back on you with questions or regrets. Okay, so she was kind of a smarty pants. We're fated to be together, Carrie. Can you feel the pull to me deep in your gut? As Mitch's smile fell, he pressed a hand to his bare stomach. From the moment we first touched, I knew you were the one for me. We're destined, as you and me, babe, for the rest of our lives. Yeah, Wolf Boy was sweet, but whatever. Romance couldn't erase the crazy in him. As Ryder brushed his hands up her back, Josie warred with herself. One part of her wanted to pull Carrie out of the alley and back into the bar, call the police, end the bachelorette party before someone got hurt. But the other part of her sensed Mitch wasn't going to hurt Carrie. If that had been his true intention, he would have attacked while he was a hairy, snarling wolf. Had that really happened? Could it be true? What would that even mean? Werewolves are real. What would be next? Vampires? Dragons? Fairies? Is he really telling the truth? She asked, keeping an eye on Mitch. I told you he was. His body hardened against hers. How is this possible? She could barely push out the words. This doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make it any less true, Ryder said, his voice laced with something dark. This situation right here had to happen. I wish he hadn't dragged you into this, but he drank too much today, and this was why you didn't want them to get married, she interrupted. Using 2 fingers, he touched her chin and brought her face up so she could look at him. I didn't think Mitch should be hiding something like that from the woman he was going to marry, he said. He couldn't keep this secret and blindside your sister that way. Honorable. Respectable. All of this is too strange and unbelievable, yet it feels, how could she explain the jumble in her head and heart? Insanely normal. Josie watched the interaction between Mitch and Carrie closely. As Mitch whispered something to his fiancée, she shook her head, buried her face in her hands, pushed him away. Mitch dropped to his knees in front of her. Josie looked away, feeling as if she was spying on something private. She's not going to be able to handle something like this. Sorrow settled over Josie like a wet blanket. It's too much for anyone to accept. My thoughts exactly, he mumbled. Her view of him will change forever. There was no way she would push Carrie into this. Not for a season's worth of Martha Silverstone specials. Freaking out about his name was one thing, but marrying someone who was a god, could she really say it? A werewolf was something different. Some werewolves marry non-shifters, Ryder said, keeping his voice low and flat. I hear it happens in the pack from time to time, but it's not for everyone. The pack. Separating from the warmth of his body, Josie put space between him and folded her arms over her chest as she gave him her full attention. There are other wolves? She sucked in a clipped breath. Wait, the park saw a large dog. A wolf, actually, Ryder corrected for her. You were right with your first suspicion. He tunneled his fingers through his hair, looking more agitated than he had a moment before. But most of the werewolves in the city are just trying to live out their normal lives. They're like you and me. He stopped, averting his gaze to his friend. Hey Mitch, can we get out of here? Can't you grovel over text message like the rest of us? Carrie scrubbed her hands over her face. I just can't. It's too weird. There were so many things that were going to fall apart if they called off the wedding now. Deposits would be forfeited. Guests disappointed. Gifts returned. Egos bruised. Hearts broken. And one television special would be cancelled. Never again to be res hot. All of that heartache and pain in the assness would be worth it, though. Long as Carrie wasn't married to a man who could shift into a howling dog. As for Ryder, he'd known what Mitch was. He tried to stop the wedding. He'd pushed for Mitch to tell Carrie. He tried to do the right thing even though she'd raked him over the coals for it. Still, he'd kissed her and touched her. More than any guy had in a long damn time. She'd been wrong to dismiss him. He'd been the only one being honest with the situation. And he hadn't wanted to say anything to Josie about it because of his loyalty to his friend. Honesty and loyalty had always been the 2 biggest things she looked for when searching for a mate. Maybe her perfect match had been in front of her all along. I should take her home, Josie said as her heart rate finally returned to normal. But I also want to thank you. Thank me. His eyebrows arched high. For what? I maybe misunderstood what you were trying to do before, but I get it now, she said. You were trying to protect my sister. And Mitch. Ryder's blue eyes blazed like the tip of a flame. I didn't want him to get burned if your sister couldn't accept him for who he was. She'd been totally wrong about him. Call me later, she asked, making a wide circle around Mitch. She grabbed her sister with one hand and opened the door to the bar with the other. When she glanced back at Ryder, he had that sexy gleam in his eye, the one that made her simmer inside. Mitch dragged himself to his feet and smacked his hands together as if he were about to pray. I'm the same guy I was before, Carrie. The same one who loves you and always will. He maybe been gaggingly sweet, but still. Werewolf. Who knew what they were capable of? I'll think about it. Carrie stepped into the hall that led back to the bar. And didn't look back. But I can't promise anything. It might not work after all. You were right. Mitch's voice was low and dejected. They'll never understand what we are, or where we come from. Whoa, hold on. Backing up, Josie turned. What we are? You're talking about you and Ryder was a wolf? But he couldn't be. She'd kissed him, she'd know if he was something other than a regular guy, wouldn't she? It wasn't like wolves had tongues that split into forks or something, but wouldn't she have felt something different? This wasn't possible. There was no way. Ryder raised his chin, clenched his jaw. I don't blame you for being pissed. She opened her mouth to cuss him out, but only gibbers came out. Stutters of sound that didn't make a lick of sense. And then she slapped herself in the cheek as hard as she could. Starbursts of pain splintered through her cheekbone and into her temples, causing her head to throb. No, not a nightmare. Definitely reality. For a split second she actually thought she and Ryder could have had a real chance. You lied to me. You let me take you in that closet and we almost. She could have even finished the thought. You should have said what you were from the start. You tricked me. Josie, I don't. It's too late. She shied away as fear settled over her. You're not what I thought you were. He flinched as his gaze met hers. You're right. Vision swimming, she put up her hand, turned on her heel, and charged into the bar. Once she was safely in the hall with the door slammed closed behind her, Josie grabbed her sister by the hand and got the hell out of there.